organization for education, science, culture. We have a very broad mandate that includes, yes, the education area, but also the sciences, natural sciences and social sciences, culture, and also communication and information. So it does create interesting opportunities for connecting up between the different areas of expertise to be innovative and creative in this area of how to deliver in the area of both biodiversity education, and using just interesting media, for example, for the delivery of some of this information. I'm heading a program in UNESCO called LINK, which is Local and Indigenous Knowledge System, which, well, I suppose it's centered in the science sector. So it's really looking at the interface and maybe more the challenges that Indigenous knowledge and its recognition brings to the whole concept of science and the importance of science in decision-making worldwide, in the sense that there's an assumption, I suppose, in mainstream society that science is the way to go. If you want to know about how to conserve biodiversity, you should talk to scientists. But I think that the whole movement of Indigenous knowledge has, over the decades, demonstrated very strongly that there is a whole other set of knowledge, understanding, and worldview that needs to be taken into account in these processes of managing, conserving biodiversity, and also educating about biodiversity. So, very quickly, I suppose, if I want to be very quick in this, there's a lot of overlap with things that John is doing in the framework of the CBD, but certainly the application of complementarity.
Not overlap.
That's right. Complementarity is right. The UN. We work together in a number of different areas, and I suppose one is ensuring the recognition of Indigenous knowledge in the whole process of conserving biodiversity and managing biodiversity. But the other area that's very important for us is ensuring that the knowledge continues to be dynamic and alive within Indigenous communities. And that means worrying about the transmission of the knowledge from generation to generation. And these are concerns, of course, that when we go and when in discussion with Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities, there are issues that are brought to the table immediately in terms of concerns about, yes, the loss of Indigenous knowledge, but how to ensure that knowledge is continues to be transmitted from the elders to the younger generation. And in all of this, one of the considerations that's very important is that, of course, for young Indigenous peoples are more and more are engaged, well, worldwide engaged in formal education. That means they go to school. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but in terms of transmitting traditional knowledge, whereas before they would be within the community, engaging with the parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, and all the rest all day long. Now they're like everyone else, or like most kids in mainstream society, going to school maybe 5 days a week from 9 to 5 or 9 to 3, and so the process of transmission are not the same as before. And then there's a whole education. We have to think about the formal education system itself, which in many cases in most countries is based largely on a very European model, a Western model of education, how to learn the content as well. In many cases, it's not very often that you find the traditional knowledge or Indigenous knowledge in the education system. So it's something that really needs to be addressed. And of course, UNESCO has a mandate for education for all, but this sort of, again, the mainstream ideology of getting education to the same education package, the same monolithic idea about what people should be educated about is something that needs to be challenged, questioned, and refined. So we approach that question from the point of view of bringing up the whole issue of Indigenous languages in the education system, and also content, Indigenous knowledge, how to effectively bring it into formal education and also non-formal education. How to put the community, if you will, at the center of the education process. So just very quickly, a few examples of some things that we have been doing in this area of education. This is just, I'll pass it around. This is from the Solomon Islands, work that's been done in Marovo Lagoon, in the Marovo language, but also in English. Simply documenting words for the regions and the rainforest environment. It's quite impressive. More than 1,200 words in the Marovo language for features of the coral reef, for the lagoon, for the rainforest, plants, fish. Just maybe a reminder to biodiversity managers that if they're thinking about going to the lagoon and conserving and managing biodiversity, well, there's a whole set of knowledge and very detailed and sophisticated knowledge that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, in the education area, I'll just pass it around. In the education area, we're working with this encyclopedia, if you will, to go into the communities and have the young kids with the teachers look at the encyclopedia and basically ask them two things. One, pick one of the terms in the encyclopedia, go talk to your auntie, your grandparents, whoever, or your father or mother, gather more information, if you will, about it, or find a term that's not in the, that doesn't exist in the encyclopedia, and go find out information about that, whether it's a plant or it's a feature of the coral reef. Find that new term and collect information about that, and doing that in your own language. And in many of the kids, it's the first time they actually do exercise in school in their own languages. And this is, Solomon Islands is quite interesting because it's Melanesia. There's 70 to 80 languages in that small country. The encyclopedia itself is in Morovo, which is one of the 7 or 8 major languages in Solomon Islands. But if you look at the index in the back, there's also cross-links between Tukwaba and Vanunu, which are 2 related languages, so that in an initial attempt to just try to bridge across to the several languages that are spoken in the Solomon Islands. This is just a look at the encyclopedia. You see the entries they're short entries. The terms in Morovo, a short text in Morovo, and then a text in English. The Morovo text is not the same as the English one. People chose to say what they wanted the English audience to understand and what Morovo speakers could understand. And there's information in the Morovo text that the Solomon people from Morovo Island felt comfortable. If someone knows the Morovo language, then it's okay for them to have that information. But they didn't translate. It's not a word by word translation into English. They chose what to say in Morovo and what to say in English. This is just an example of the types of exercises that are being done by the kids. This is just a drawing showing the traditional fishing techniques in which where the whole community comes together and uses vines and plants to form a long net-like structure which encircle the fish, and then they close the circle slowly all together in order to gather the fish together, and usually to have a large harvest for ceremonial purposes. So there's a text in the vernacular language that goes with the drawing, and so the kids are working with the encyclopedia in that way in order to encourage them to go into the community, to recognize the knowledge that's in the community, give status to that knowledge, because that knowledge there's an interaction between the school and the community. So this is a bit the idea of trying to change the dynamic of the education system to acknowledge indigenous knowledge and languages.